Welcome everyone to History Gone Wilder, part of Half History Will Travel. I am your host, the Wilder historian, Dr. Lucas Wilder, and this video completes the series on Longstreet's East Tennessee campaign. I will be animating the Overland campaign and possibly the Atlanta campaign starting in March. If you like what I do, please subscribe to the channel, consider joining the Patreon, or purchasing something from the Teespring store. I really appreciate it, and thank you. During Longstreet's time in East Tennessee, he filed charges against many of his subordinates for various military inadequacies. While the small battles were being fought, courts were being held to prosecute those Longstreet believed inadequate. One of Longstreet's targets was Lafayette McLaws, one of his longtime division commanders. McLaws inquired as to why charges were being brought against him. He was told that he exhibited a want of confidence in the efforts and plans which the commanding general has thought proper to adopt. In the filing of the courts-martial, Longstreet focused on McLaws's failed attack on Fort Sanders. The filing stated that McLaws failed to push his skirmish line far enough forward, he failed to select the best units for the assault, and he failed to provide ladders to exit the ditch in front of the fort. McLaws didn't stand for such an accusation and began preparing for his defense. One of the biggest advantages on the division commander's side was the fact that he had been told he didn't need any kind of material to cross the ditch because it was deemed too shallow. McLaws even wrote to the Adjutant General Samuel Cooper to argue that Longstreet was using him as a scapegoat for his own deficiencies during the campaign. Longstreet's co-conspirator in the attempted removal of Braxton Bragg from command of the Army of Tennessee, Simon Bolivar Buckner, was appointed the president of the court. When the court convened in Morristown, Tennessee, Longstreet postponed it because of the active campaign. It was convened again in Newmarket, Tennessee, but was postponed again because of the active campaign. By March, the court finally convened at Greenville, Tennessee, for a couple of days and at Midway for a couple of days. Longstreet testified before the court and asserted that McLaws's ill-prepared men and their battle formation resulted in the failure in the attack on Fort Sanders. McLaws reached out to the now former Army of Tennessee commander Braxton Bragg, who was in Richmond advising President Jefferson Davis. Bragg had his own misgivings about Longstreet and wanted to help McLaws defeat Longstreet in court. If the court decided against McLaws, then Bragg would press charges against Longstreet for disobedience of orders, neglect of duty, and want of cordial cooperation and support. Of the 3 charges against McLaws, he was found innocent in 2 of them. The only guilty charge was that he failed to supply ladders to his troops. They found that even if the ditch was shallow, he should have taken every step to ensure that his men could get out of the ditch. In May, Samuel Cooper would exonerate McLaws of any wrongdoing and restore him to field command. Brigade Commander Jerome Robertson, leader of the famed Texas Brigade, was another target of Longstreet's frustrations. Before the Battle of Chickamauga, Longstreet had problems with Robertson. He was supposed to appear before a board, but Longstreet's East Tennessee campaign canceled the appearance. At Bean Station, Micah Jenkins, Robertson's division commander, became irritated at Robertson's inability to obey orders. Robertson argued that his men were underfed and couldn't attack as ordered. The court for Robertson was held on February 12th. After only 1 day it was over, but no report was filed. Robertson was allowed to return to Texas to take charge of the reserve troops. Evander Law was the 3rd subordinate to feel Longstreet's wrath. When Longstreet installed Micah Jenkins in command of John Bell Hood's division, bypassing Law, Law took exception to that. Law refused to remain subordinate to Micah Jenkins. In December 1863, Law had offered his resignation and wanted a transfer to the cavalry. He asked for a leave of absence to present the letter to the Confederate government in Richmond, which Longstreet agreed to. Once he arrived in Richmond, on the advice of his friend John Bell Hood, Law let Hood present it to the Secretary of War, which he did but did not submit. Afterward, Hood convinced Law to reconsider and destroy the letter. Since he hadn't officially resigned or submitted his resignation, Law returned to Tennessee to take command of his brigade once again. Longstreet, seeing Law, fumed with anger. Not only did he believe that Law requested leave under false pretenses, but he had heard rumors that Law's Alabama brigade sought service in their native state, and Law's trip to Richmond was an effort to get them that transfer. Longstreet had Law arrested. Months later, Samuel Cooper would drop the charges against Law and appoint him a position in the cavalry. On March 8th, Longstreet left Greenville, Tennessee to meet with Robert E. Lee about a possible campaign in Tennessee or Kentucky. Longstreet suggested that Lee bring the Army of Northern Virginia west and they could invade Kentucky together and have the Army of Tennessee guard Richmond. Earlier in the winter, Longstreet asked for thousands of mules and horses so he could launch his own invasion of Kentucky, but those demands could not be met. Longstreet brought it up again, but it was just not feasible. Lee, Longstreet, Davis, and Bragg met, and the talk centered around Middle Tennessee. They wanted Longstreet to cut the rail line between Nashville and Chattanooga, which would threaten the Union Army in Chattanooga and northern Georgia. Longstreet wanted Joseph E. Johnston, the new commander of the Army of Tennessee, to join him, but he was informed that Johnston didn't have enough transportation to launch such a large offensive. On March 18th, Longstreet returned to Greenville, Tennessee. John M. Schofield, the Union commander in East Tennessee, pushed as far as Bull's Gap to gain information about Longstreet's force and their disposition, but was forced back. Schofield knew that Longstreet would eventually leave East Tennessee and wanted to land a blow to his Confederate opponent. But when the 9th Corps was recalled back to the east, Schofield's troop strength was greatly reduced. By early April, Longstreet's command was at Bristol, Tennessee/Virginia, where they remained for about 2 weeks before leaving for Lee's Army of Northern Virginia in mid-April. With Longstreet out of the region, the East Tennessee campaign came to a close, but Confederate forces still persisted in the area, sometimes in small bands and sometimes in more concentrated forces. Schofield didn't stay long in East Tennessee. He transferred to the region, believing it to be the location of major fighting to win himself glory, but when he arrived he realized that glory did not abound in the region. With the 9th Corps gone to the east, Schofield was left with very few troops. The 4th Corps was also called away for the Atlanta campaign, and soon Schofield would join the Atlanta campaign. East Tennessee would still be the site of many small engagements, as both sides vied for the agriculturally rich region, and Union forces would begin to push toward the major salt works in southwest Virginia by the end of 1864. Longstreet's East Tennessee campaign is a black eye on the Confederate general's record. The campaign yielded no material gain and drained the resources of the Confederacy. Likewise, the Union commanders who opposed Longstreet, except for Burnside, who had defeated him at Fort Sanders, was criticized for allowing Longstreet to remain in the region without bringing him to battle.